Thank you for listening to another Gaslec podcast. I'm not feeling my best today, so I do apologise if I sound a little bit hoarse, and I do pause. Hopefully, I can pause it in time for a little cough. So I think it's a little seasonal bug that's flying around. So apologies for that. So this week's episode, we're going to talk about electrical side of what we do. But first of all, here's my friend Sean to tell you about why we do the podcast. Thank you for listening to another Gaslec podcast, the show to help DIYers, new people into the industry, and those who are wanting to expand their knowledge. Each week we'll pick a topic and go into details, and with special guests and listeners' questions answered, we will look forward to some of the conversations. So let's get back to the show. Right, so electrical, what we do. So probably the easiest thing to probably start off with is the fuse boxes. So in electrical terms, we call them consumer units. So it's what the consumer units sort of touch, and you've got your fuses or your trips or your breakers or whatever you want to call them. They all mean the same thing really. But sometimes they'll be labelled up as DB, which is distribution boards. So if you've got more than one, normally a DB1, DB2 or CU1, CU2 for sort of domestic and commercial aspect, sort of big domestic, and then or you've had an additionals to your electrical circuits. So if you had a loft conversion done, sometimes it'd be easier to run some new cables from the loft for lighting and sockets and bring it down into a new little tiny unit all on its own, standalone. So you've got your existing house, garage, sheds, outdoor lighting and all that stuff. And then you just fit your new one in, and then that just takes care of the new side. So there's a couple of things that that have come in over the years. Apologies, it's an active office. Coming over the years, which is the introduction of RCDs, which is residual current devices. So these monitor sort of earth leakage to about 30 milliamps. So there's been different ratings over the years, but there's sort of 30 milliamps, sort of the standard these days. So if there's any leakage to earth, either from neutral or from live, it detects it and it trips out, usually within about 20, 30 milliseconds is normally tripping out time. So a very, very, very quick disconnection of power to the system. So these typically are done on what we call split loads. So you'll have maybe upstairs on one side and downstairs on the other. Or you may have upstairs lighting, downstairs sockets on one side, and then upstairs, and then the vice versa on the other side, if you get what you're meaning. So if one side trips out, you've got sockets so you can plug a lamp in, and the other side trips out, you've got lights, but you've got no sockets. So, it's less inconvenient. So I've seen them left and right of a house, so the left side's on one side, and then the other side's on the other bit. But that's that then. So they come out with something called RCBOs, which is basically it's an RCD built inside the MCBs. So if you have a problem on your lighting circuit, it'll just trip out the lights. So it's like having 10 fuses, 10 MCBs, and all 10 have got their own RCDs built in. So if one trips out, it doesn't take out a whole bank of sockets and lighting fixtures and fittings. So that's come on, and the prices of those massively come down in price. So typically now when we fit in a new consumer unit distribution board fuse box, we'll fit them with RCBOs because it's just so much easier to identify if there's a problem. Normally an outside socket getting wet, outside light getting wet, that's really typically where we start. Any of that sort of stuff gets affected by the water, and it starts doing what we call nuisance tripping. We'd fit those in, and there's a few other regs to do with meter tails, which is the blue and the brown that come in from the old black and red 16mm. They now go up in size to 25s. They're called them meter tails. But yeah, so that's on that side there. So another thing we get asked quite a lot to do is called ECIRs. Now these come in a few years ago, which is the electrical the electrical condition installation report. So what this is to do with what's called fixed wiring, which is your grey cables typically that are fitted inside your house, behind the walls, under the floors, up in the loft, that you can't really see. So that's called fixed wiring. So all of that wiring now does have a shelf life, does have a life expectancy. And the older cables that have been fitted in that you can't see start to deteriorate. So with the the ECIR, what that test does, it puts a high voltage from the battery operated device called a multifunction test meter or an MFT, puts 500 to 1,000 volts down it from the batteries. So it's got no current to it, but it monitors to see if there's voltage leaking across, and that then tells us if there's a degrading of the cable or the fascias. So sometimes you get some really old switches or damaged switches that are leaking over. So they're required on rental properties and HMOs every 5 years. And that's sort of the maximum, really. So some people do them sooner, some people, and certainly if your readings are, you want on an installation resistance check, when you're putting 500 volts down it, you're really wanting above 500 mega ohms. Really, that's what you're looking for. Anything more than one mega ohm is a pass, but we should be looking at a brand new install greater than 500, like easy, like dead easy. So if we start getting lower numbers, like sort of your twos and your threes, you might start saying, actually, I wouldn't recommend we do this again in 5 years. Let's do it in 2, and then we'll see what the readings are, and we'll compare the readings from today, and we'll compare them in 2 years' time to see if the cables are actually degrading and breaking down. There was something coming years ago. I'm not sure. Should have looked this up first. It's called VIR, vulcanized Indian rubber, and that was a funny. I've come across that myself. It's a funny sort of cable, and it was like a rubber cable, with the conductors being sort of pushed down some sort of sleeves. It was a funny thing, but the actual rubber breaks down, and that VIR stuff is deteriorating. So if you've got it in your house and it's not already gone, it's probably haven't got very long left. And then you start getting what we call nuisance tripping, which is tripping out continuously. Because of it's just broken down. So most of it's actually been replaced by now, but through people sort of doing rewires and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's ECIRs, electrical condition installation reports. Another thing that we've started to get into is electric vehicle charging. So you've got your EV. So we at Gaslec, we've got a hybrid estate car. So we've got to do our servicing and stuff like that, some lighter work that we do. Rather than having another van, we can put this into. It's actually cheaper to park in London with a hybrid vehicle. You can get into the multi-storey car parks to park in London and in city centres. It's just a bit easier to get around in some situations. Obviously, you can't carry all the stuff in it. But I've got an EV vehicle. So our hybrid vehicle, doesn't have a very big battery in the scheme of it all, and we can actually charge that off of a 3-pin plug. So we can have an external socket, plug it in, and it has a curly whirly wire, and plug it in, and off it goes, because it doesn't have a very big battery. So that's typically what we'd normally call a 3 kilowatt outlet or a 3 kilowatt charger. So on that there, so if we just do some basic maths, so 3 kilowatts, so if we do 3,000 watts and we share that into 230 volts, thank you Europe for that a few years ago from our 240 volts, that brings us down by calculation to 13.04 amps. So that's a plug socket. That's your kettle, that's your toaster, that's your sort of heavy loading appliance. So we can run that off a plug top, and that just runs just on its limit there, absolutely fine. So then we start looking at 7 kilowatt chargers. So once again, we do the 7,000 watts shared into 230 volts, and now we're still looking at 30.43 amps. So now we're starting looking at a sort of good size electric shower. So it's sort of that sort of size. So now we're going to start looking at maybe like a 6mm cable rather than the 2.5. So we'll start looking at the distribution board. So some houses, old houses, only had 60 amps coming into them for the whole thing. So most houses have got 80 and some have got 100 amp incoming main supply. So we've got to start looking at what we've got. And we've got 30 amp just for your car charger if you've got a fully electric. Then we start looking at, wow, this is going to be potentially maybe just under half, if not half of your electrical coming into your property. So rather than just wiring up just a straightforward socket straight in, plug the vehicle in, and to hoots with everything else going on in your house, they have these clamps that go on the meters. So what it does, it looks at what your house is currently drawing, and then what it'll do, it'll limit the amount of power to the car charger. So if you've got an induction hob running, a hairdryer running, electric oven, you've got some big things that are big consumers of electric, which aren't any smart technologies that are running at the same time. It will actually reduce the power it's allowing to go through to the car, so it doesn't overload your incoming main supply. And then typically it will then just monitor that, and then it will just rise it up for your demand as it comes through. And obviously there are apps on there where you can schedule your charging, so you can have it coming on at at low rates, reduced rates if you've got those tariffs on your electric suppliers coming in. So yeah, that's EV chargers. So we're getting a bit more busy on those. Well, I would like to say, actually, as a final thought on EV chargers, they're not all the same. So you do get some very basic ones that you just plug in and they work, and then you do get some bit more fancy ones, and you get some which are a bit sort of different in their design, which are at different costs. So you can get a bit more of a squarey type or a bit more of a roundy type. So yeah, they do different designs, and then obviously that's then reflected in the cost as well. So solar panels. So it's nothing we've really got into at the moment. I'd like to think this time next year we'll be underway with it. Certainly, with the cost of panels really coming down in price. I did get a quote for some panels the other day. They're about sort of 50, 60 quid a panel plus the VAT. So super come down in cost. Absolutely super. That's just a panel without all the frames and stuff. But yeah, they've really come down in cost. And the inverters as well have plummeted, where we're producing so much more of this technology in the Far East. It's really, the technology's come on and the price has got cheaper. So, and now obviously the big thing we've got coming up of recent years is battery storage. So because the feed-in tariff, where back in the early days you used to get 44p a unit if you fed it in, and those people that are on those sort of granddad tariffs, they're still benefiting from them now, but they were scrapped years and years and years ago. So the feed-in tariff now is, last time I looked, it was just a couple of pence. So it doesn't actually warrant you producing electricity and giving it to the back to the electricity board. You have to get it all signed off and get it all approved to be able to do that, as well as, and then you only get a few pence a kilowatt. So it doesn't really sort of warrant doing that at the moment. So and that's why they're looking at battery storage. So Tesla have got their battery storage options, and there's a few other companies out there that are doing them as well. So it'll be something we'll be looking at probably over the winter. On how we get that set up and get it ready for the summer, because it really is a summer thing, getting up on roofs and sort of making a good pairing up with the roof team as well, and getting scaffold and doing it properly and doing it safely. But that will be something we'll get into next year, really. So apologies for the stop-start of this recording. I kept having to put it on pause because I'm not feeling too great. So apologies for the quality of this recording. So yeah, just to wrap up this episode, really. So I think probably the biggest thing I can say is that just know where your fuse box is, your consumer unit, your distribution board, and how to turn the electric off. We did have a electrical fire at one of our customers' houses. We fitted a boiler to, and we've done some electrical works. It was a good few years ago now, but it is absolutely devastating. We don't go to too many of them these days, but they had the old wire fuses that wired in, and you sort of pushed them in. So there's they take a while to blow because they burn through slowly. And that was all changed out to a split load with the RCD for protection. But just make sure you know where the board is and how to turn it off. So if it's your understairs cupboard, I know space is always at a premium in homes, certainly with families. But just remember, how do you turn it off if you do smell burning, if there is a bit of a fizzing socket, something's crackling or flickering away, just how you do turn it off. And certainly on the gas side as well. So obviously there's a lot of what we do. just where the gas meter is, and it's always to the left of the gas meter, the handle, and it falls to the off position, 90 degrees to the gas pipe on the incoming side. So yeah, just make sure you and your family are aware, obviously, how they go off, and obviously make sure we check our smoke alarms and CO alarms in our properties. We do a lot of rental properties, and we go in and we test the smoke alarms. And you look up and there's just the plastic thing screwed to the ceiling where the smoke alarm used to live. And they took it down because they were doing toast and it burnt and went off 2 years ago. And they haven't put it back up yet. They're just saying they quite got at the time. So these things are like insurance policies, really. You can't buy them when you need it. So make sure it works, get it tested. I think the fire brigade recommend once a month just to push the button on a smoke alarm. But it really does make a difference. And when you need it, and when your family need it, it'll go off, and then that could be the difference between a disaster and an absolute catastrophe. Okay, guys, well, thank you very much indeed for listening. Thank you, and have a fabulous week, and long live the summer, and hopefully it continues. Take care, guys. Wish you well. Thank you. Bye.